little bit about you. What did you do before you became a Kare Plus business owner?
Directly before, I spent 6 years working for the local authority as a surveyor. Before that, I was self-employed as a surveyor. Before that, I was living abroad for 10 years, working for a construction company. So,
oh wow!
There you go.
And what country were you working in overseas?
I was based in Tokyo, but the job was kind of project development. So I started out in developing countries in East Asia, and then once I moved back to the UK, I took over development in Africa. So yeah, so I spent a lot of time in East Africa, down that way. Yeah.
So it seems like obviously that line of work was something that you were extremely passionate about. What made you want to change and get into the healthcare sector?
Well, to be honest with you, kind of change was forced on me, because I was quite happy disappearing for weeks on end and let my wife get on with the kids and everything. But once, you know, as you know, my son was diagnosed with autism at a very early age, and once he started growing up and became more and more of a handful, that's when, you know, we had to make changes to our life, and that's when I stopped, you know, that job and, you know, retrained to become a surveyor in the UK, and frankly, that's what coloured me going into working for the local authority, because they're fantastic employers in terms of family life and giving times off and all that. So it was as much kind of like change of circumstances kind of forcing you into doing it. But once Georgie went into full-time care, so that was about 5 years ago now, that's when you kind of go like, right, well, I've got the breathing space now to do something that I wanted to do for a while. And although we'd looked at different franchises, we felt, what I felt was very strongly that we had an affinity with healthcare, because we'd used carers ourselves so much as Georgie got more and more challenging, we'd relied more and more on carers. If anything, that kind of highlighted what I felt was a problem with the healthcare carers market in general, which was it's a real hit and miss situation with actually getting carers into your own home. And what I found was that we had a niche problem, because we had a 13, 14, 15-year-old with very challenging behavior. And it was really difficult to find somebody who could take on that kind of support for us. And the quality of the care was really variable. So when George actually went into full-time care, when he kind of outgrew our ability to look after him, that's when I thought, well, you know, this is probably an area that I felt I could do some good. And at the same time, you know, definitely there's a need for it. So it was kind of like a happy marriage, really.
Fantastic. So you mentioned when you responded to that question there that you'd looked at a few franchising opportunities. Why did you select Kare Plus as your chosen franchise partner?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a confusing marketplace, I suppose, because I'd looked into franchising years and years ago when we first made the transition back to living in the UK. When we started looking at a franchise, you know, I'm sure, because there's so many on the market, you know, and you know, the usual names. And in fairness, I did meet most of them, but the stories were very similar in the majority of them. And what I found was you get sucked into this sales mentality with franchises, and you know, you have these kind of meetings and you sign the non-disclosures, and usually the process goes something along the lines of, you know, this is how good our franchises perform, and this time next year you'll be a millionaire and all that kind of thing. And you kind of take it with a pinch of salt. But when I met with Kare Plus, there was a couple of differences. One was they were very optimistic, or they were very, I would say optimistic, but they were also very clear about the fact that there's a lot of hard work that needed to go into it. And so whereas, you know, Tom and Steve, who I met, the first time, the owners of Kare Plus, they were saying, look, it's a great business and it's a great model, but be under no illusions. You've got to be fully committed and you've absolutely got to work hard. I felt that was very honest. And then the other great thing was the dual model. So the fact that you could have an agency as well as home care, and that was unique. And I felt that was a good thing. And the territories were larger, so that was the other things as well. So you think, well, because you're giving up a big chunk of your life because it's a 5-year commitment that you're buying into. Plus, in my case, we'll be going on for 5 years. So you think, well, there's plenty of scope and room to grow. So altogether, it ticks a lot of boxes, really.
So given that you had quite an extensive level of experience within your career portfolio itself, I'm just intrigued to know, why was a franchise partner so important to you? What made you look into getting to a franchise as opposed to doing it on your own?
Knowledge, really, I think is really what it was. What I did know very much about care was it's a highly regulated, highly observed industry. So CQC, all the regulations, quite right too. I mean, that's just the way it is. And, and also as well, because you're taking responsibilities for people's lives, you want to do it right and you want to, obviously do it without any problems. So I felt this particular sector, it would be virtually impossible to do it without, the backing of a partner who had that knowledge. And really, that's what I felt I was buying with the franchise. You're buying somebody's experience, and the fact that I was able to meet people who'd been working in that industry at that time for 20 odd years, and, the team that they were bringing alongside them also had that 20 years of experience. And you think, well, really, that's what you're buying with a franchise. You're not buying something that's, off the shelf, but you are buying the support to get you there.
Great stuff. And you've also mentioned there that the true reasons were essentially, I think it's fair to say, that you value the safety net that a franchise partner could offer you.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, I was just wondering, what would you say the key benefits of becoming a Kare Plus franchisee have been based on your journey so far?
Support. I mean, support and guidance, I think, is, the analogy I always use is that a franchise is like buying, so say you're going to build a house, right? And what a franchise is, it's like you're buying the plans for the house. You're buying a set of blueprints. But, the actual laying of the bricks and the wiring and the flooring and all that, you've actually got to do that yourself. But, what the franchise is able to offer you is the plans and the fact that you've got somebody who will come and look over your shoulder and say, well, you're doing that wrong. You want to lay your bricks this way, and you don't want to do it that way. You want to do it this way. And that's really the story of the journey, which is, this periodic kind of, regular, I have to say, kind of, relationship with people that gives you that ongoing support. And the other thing is, in particular healthcare, it's a very fast changing industry. I mean, particularly since we got the CQC regulation, the constant updates, the constant moving of the industry in general. I think if I was on my own, that would have been quite overwhelming. But the fact that you've got that support in place to do the thinking for you, has been really beneficial. And I think it's really come to light with the last 3 months. I mean, as we talk now, we're at the end of 3 months of lockdown, or just coming to the end of it. And I think, that would have been a lot more challenging to deal with had I not had the support of the franchise to proactively, be abreast of the situation and keep on top of it. So we've actually come through the past 3 months relatively unscathed, I have to say. And again, if I'd been on my own, I don't think we would have quite been in the same position. So for me, it's that strength of support.
What would you say then, if someone was sitting on the fence about entering into a healthcare franchise? What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, make sure it's what you want to do. You've really got to want to do it, and I genuinely mean that. Make sure it's the right industry for you. You've really got to, because it takes commitment. For me personally, it was 24/7, to get everything up and running. And then it's only when you've got people in the business that you can trust that you can start pull back a little bit and take your foot off the gas. Like you said, get a holiday. I didn't have a holiday for years, something like that. So, you know, you've got to be committed. I spent a lot of time doing due diligence before I'd even committed to Kare Plus. And, you know, I'd spoken to companies in my area, and what problems did you have? And, you know, what do you think of agencies and stuff like that? And of course, you know, you spend a lot of time getting the phone put down on you. But I spoke to enough people to give me a sense that there was a problem to be solved, you know.
So 4 years into working in the healthcare sector, has it changed you?
Well, I was going to say I've got less hair now, but I didn't have that much to start with, to be honest with you. I don't know. It's given me, I think, probably more confidence, you know. I mean, I'd played at running a business before, because I was kind of self-employed, but I was a one-man band. You know, having grown now to where we're a healthy turnover with a stable group of people that I respect and trust gives you more of an understanding, you know, obviously more understanding about the industry as well. So yeah, but you never want to get too complacent, I think. You know, I suppose franchise is a little bit like a marriage, in so much as you kind of grow to understand each other more over time, and you know, they also grow to understand you. And I think Kare Plus is that kind of franchise where they're not trying to put you into a box per se. They're setting the framework of how you need to operate, but they're letting you choose, you know, the type of box that you want to build. So, you know, so they've got that flexibility, which I think is good.